Hey everybody, Michael Sayre here, the design lead for Infinite Reimagine. I am introducing you guys to today's Infinite Reimagine podcast video, which will not be episode 1, but will actually be premiering before episode 1. We had a special guest on, Jason Bulmahn, the publisher at Minetaur Games, and he's getting ready to release a new game called Hellfinder. We thought that we would go ahead and prioritize getting his video out to you as soon as possible so that you can enjoy and learn a little bit about that game while it's in crowdfunder in case you want to jump on and back it. So we hope you enjoy this video. We talk a bit about Hellfinder, we talk about Infinite Reimagine, and we talk about some other games and concepts and ideas that we have. And the follow-up video is going to be one that we'll release about a week or so after this, where we're going to talk a little bit more about games that inspired Infinite Reimagine, get more into JRPGs and things like that. So enjoy this video, everybody. We hope you have a great week. And until next time, reimagine your world. Hi, I'm Mike Sayre. Welcome to the Infinite Reimagine podcast. With me today are my co-hosts, Nick Davis.
I'm Nick Davis, they, them pronouns, longtime game master, very rarely a player, longtime gamer. RPGs are kind of my bread and butter, ever since Final Fantasy I. So, happy to be here.
Matt Chapmond.
Hi, I'm Matt Chapmond. I am the movie guy around here. I also played video games forever, play tabletop RPGs, and just love talking about everything. So I'm excited to talk today.
And our special guest, the publisher for Minetaur Games, Jason Bulmahn.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome. Glad to be here. I am Jason Bulmahn. I'm the publisher and game designer at Minetaur Games, but I suspect most people know me from my work on Pathfinder and my day job making that game happen. But yeah, today I'm here to chat a little bit about Hellfinder and my upcoming crowdfunding campaign, which I'm doing through Minetaur Games.
Yeah, so I thought it would be a really great opportunity for us to talk because Jason has Hellfinder going into crowdfunding soon here. We have just recently launched the Infinite Reimagine Quick Start Guide and have an adventure coming out in pretty short order. And one of the things that both Infinite Reimagine and Hellfinder have in common is that Jason and I have both been directors of the rules and lore team or related departments in Pathfinder and have both spent a lot of time working on the Pathfinder 2e engine. And we took that experience and that knowledge and expertise and pieces of that engine and used it to build our games. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we took this base engine of a game, how we make these base engines of games, and how we convert them into things that work better with genres. And just to kind of set a little bit of the field for that, you might be kind of wondering, like, what do you mean convert for genre? It's a game system. I can play any genre with it, can't I? I know a philosophy that Jason and I both share is that it is very important that a game engine be tailored to the genre it is trying to sell. Horror requires a different kind of foundation than high fantasy. Sci-fi requires different tools than low fantasy. And if you build an engine for one of these and you try to hit a different genre and you don't adjust the tools and the systems that you have in place to really fit that genre, you're going to have tonal mismatches. Sure, you can do it, but you need to make sure the purpose of a role-playing game is to tell a story, right? It's to tell a collective story. And if you try to tell a story in like a Star Trek style universe, right? But you have a gritty shoot 'em first captain. Well, then you've told, the first season of Star Trek. But all of these things change, right? And so you want to make sure that your game tells that. So for Infinite Reimagine, I have a world that's set in the dream. I took a lot of inspirations from JRPGs and roguelites, right? And so for JRPGs, that's a really natural fit with a system like Pathfinder or D&D. They both tend to have level-based systems. They both tend to have a very fantasy focus and things like that. But a thing that is very different in a roguelite is you usually don't have extended inventory management, right? You usually get a new character element that comes into play when you complete a loop, and then you start over. And we thought about that a lot in Infinite Reimagined. Nick, I know you were there as I was doing a lot of the initial playing with this. And we removed the entire inventory system, the entire item economy from Infinite Reimagined. We took all of that out and we replaced it with aspects and boons. Aspects are character building tools like ice, the road, flame, forest, these other fundamental ideas. GM, who we call dreamers in Infinite Reimagined, they can use these tools to create an adventure, and it gives them boons. And boons are thematic elements that add to characters based on this, and they can be something as simple as healing salves, new abilities, weapon add-ons, all of these things. So as you play through a campaign that your dreamer presents to you, you don't get consumables, you don't pay to upgrade your weapons, instead you get boons. At the end of every one-level adventure loop, you pick a boon that becomes a permanent part of your character, and then you move forward. And that's how we did one of the many changes, but that is one of the kind of fundamental changes of how did we make this system that we built on the foundation of the Pathfinder 2e rules feel more like a roguelite, feel more like something where you're building your character by playing the game rather than building the character to play the game. Jason, you've got Hellfinder coming up. You've also done Hopefinder in the past. Tell me a little bit about some of the ways that you have started from that engine and changed it to match these genres, and tell us a little bit about what these genres are.
Yeah, so both of these games, they're in my H series. Basically take the core pieces of Pathfinder and kind of pull them apart and recognize what parts work for the genre I'm trying to create and what parts don't. I think, game mechanics express themselves at the table through how they are resolved and what their effects are on play. I think in most cases, you kind of want, as a game designer, the game mechanics, generally speaking, you want them to kind of fade into the background, but you want their feeling, their expression, to kind of reinforce the theme. And when it doesn't, when you feel like you're doing something that doesn't quite line up with the way the narrative is going, you've got this weird sort of dissonance that happens. It can pop people out of the story, it can pop people out of the game. So when I started with Hopefinder, Hopefinder is a zombie apocalypse hack of Pathfinder 2e. And the entire point behind it is you are a scrappy survivor desperately trying to eke out a living in the ruins of the world. That, a zombie plague wiped out 99.99% of the world, and the lonely survivors are huddling in small enclaves. It draws a lot of inspiration from Last of Us, from almost every bit of genre fiction. There's my stickers. And
may I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Is this within? You say it's a Pathfinder hack.
Yeah.
Is this set within a Pathfinder universe or within a real world universe?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
The Z Plague broke out at a Wisconsin pig farm and quickly spread throughout the world. Seattle was one of the first places that had a second cluster. And
sure.
But eventually it went worldwide and killed most people. Now, for that game, I realized a couple of things. First of all, something that's really important to most of your survival games, because that's really what it was. It was a zombie survival game. So I needed equipment to degrade. You couldn't expect everything to work perfectly all the time. So as you used your gear, it might collect dings. And your armor would get dinged every time you got hit. Your weapons would get dinged whenever you crit failed with them. And eventually, they'd get enough dings where they stop working. And you can spend skills. You can have skills to repair things and fix things up. But likewise, I also wanted it to be a game of attrition. So the entire mechanics, I basically scaled down the hit point progression and gave you armor that gave you basically damage reduction. It made it so that you took less damage every time a zombie hit you. But then the armor would degrade every time that happened. And if the armor prevented all of the damage, you would take a bruise. And bruises would just accumulate throughout an adventure because you're getting battered and beat up. and eventually you get exhausted by bruises. So the entire mechanics of the system were made so that you don't take a lot of damage, or you better not be, because when you start taking damage, that's how every zombie basically says how it can give you the plague. And for most of the low level ones, it's only on a crit. But eventually you get to zombies where if they do damage to you at all, you have to roll a save to see if you can track the plague. And so the entire game is much more freeform. It's less like, here's this long ongoing narrative. The story might be, there is a firehouse and we need its generator. Go inside there and find it. And you have no idea where it is. You've never been in there before, and you have no idea how many zombies are in there. As a matter of fact, that's the intro adventure in the back of the GM's guide there. So that game was all about survival. When it came time for Hellfinder, I basically took the engine apart again. Hopefinder only goes up to 5th level. Hellfinder's a different kind of game. It's set in the modern time frame. It's a few years in the future, but it's still modern technology. The world is not undone. The world is what it is. But for this game, it has a different narrative frame. For Hellfinder, the narrative frame is forefront, especially in this initial kind of game. You are all agents working for the Bureau. But you're not in good standing. You have messed up. You are a basement dwelling agent of the Bureau. And you all work for a department called Clean, the Co-Departmental Land Equipment Assets Network. And your job is basically to find waste in old Bureau contracts and close them out. It's boring paperwork. But occasionally you get assigned field work. And this entire game revolves around the central story of a handful of Clean agents being sent to a field office in the Northwoods of Wisconsin to close down a field office that supposedly was shuttered 20 years ago. But they never went and picked up all the stuff. They're still paying rent on the buildings and whatnot. So you're being sent to close that down, and that's where the story begins. So for this game, I'm much more focused, because it is a horror game at its heart. It's less about attrition, and it's more about the fragility of your characters. And Pathfinder, by its very nature, is not an engine in which you are very fragile. So once again, I'm going to be slowing down the hit point progression. That's an important component of it. But I needed something to make it so that you could deal with threats, deal with problems that didn't necessarily just drain your hit points. So I needed a second track. And for that, I have stress. So you have hit points and you have stress. And as you get stressed, and the great part about stress is you can get stress from a lot of little things. Stress can happen to you all the time. As a matter of fact, standing around in the rain without an umbrella for too long will slowly give you stress. It doesn't damage you. You're just soaked. But it does wear on you. It frazzles you. It puts you out of your game. Being in a place where there's an alarm going off constantly can give you stress. But also, seeing a mutilated dead body can give you stress, right? So that's combined with one other aspect of character design that isn't really present or isn't well present in Pathfinder, and that is long-term effects, right? In Pathfinder, you can get cursed or something like that, but you can't really break your arm. You can't really, have a panic attack. There's some spells and effects that do things like that, but most of them are solved by other spells and effects, or they go away rather quickly because that's the nature of the game. So for Hellfinder, I added trauma. And trauma happens whenever you take critical hits. That's how you can get physical trauma. And you can get short-term trauma, which is just when you take enough damage, you end up with bruises and sprains and things that are generally considered short-term. Like, I've got a headache, I have a laceration, I have a bruise, maybe I sprained my leg. And then you can get very serious traumas, like, I broke my arm. I lost a finger. These are things that don't generally get better or don't get better in a short period of time. Now, likewise, you can have mental traumas as well. If you take too much stress too quickly, you can get panic attacks, you can black out, you can have short-term mental traumas. But you can also end up with long-term traumas as well. You can develop phobias, you can, develop, adverse reactions to things, or, in extreme cases end up with, some form of dementia. So that's meant to be there to give the characters a sense of stake, a sense of warning about what they're doing, because that's the thing that Pathfinder 2e kind of doesn't have as much. Your characters are supposed to boldly charge into the lair with the monsters and the dead things. In this game, you're going to want to investigate as much as you can. You're going to want to figure things out as much as you can, because you can't have these traumas start piling up on you because you can't get rid of them. There's no easy way to make them go away. You know, the game has, you know, some ways that are like, how can you get rid of stress? How can you heal hit points? There are ways to do that, but the traumas are not easy to make go away. There are some ways, like, I mean, you can have surgery done. You can go get, you know, some therapy or maybe some drugs to help you with some of your traumas. But by and large, you can't just solve them at the snap of a finger, especially not in a tiny, rundown, degenerate town in the middle of the North Woods of Wisconsin. So the entire narrative is built that way. There's more to it than that. And this is where we hit the one trick of Hellfinder. Hellfinder is actually delivered in 3 sealed packets. It's not a book. It's 3 packets of paper. And they're hole punched and they're meant to go into a binder. But you're not supposed to open packets 2 and 3. Packets 2 and 3 have additional rules in the next chapter of the story, but they're kept a secret from you until you hit that point in the tale, intentionally. Because I'm trying to maintain an air of mystery about the full breadth and depth of the story. Of course, there'll be, you know, kind of warnings to let you know kind of what content to expect, because let me tell you, it doesn't start with the sort of content you're going to see at the end. But it's, you know, it's there to kind of take you on that journey. So it is, you know, again, Pathfinder was built to be a very modular engine, right? You know, it's made of various game modules structured around a core math mechanic. And as long as you understand the impacts of the scaling of that and you control them, you can kind of pull off the modules and replace them with other things and get the game you want. It's work, but it really can create a very satisfying game experience.
Yeah. Nick, as you know, we did a lot of that we kind of went the opposite direction, right, with Infinite Reimagine, because there were things like armor in Pathfinder retains these simulationist elements, but it also has to fit within this very tight math framework. And so a lot of times in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, picking the right armor really kind of comes down to what are my stats and what is the piece of armor that adds to that stat to equal a total bonus of 5 with the, you know, the least possible jiggling and stuff going on over here. And we were just like, we don't need that in Infinite Reimagine. We're in the dream. We're not really going to be keeping track of it. We have these cool boons where we want whatever armor you're wearing for you to be able to be like, we killed the Beetle King in the mountain lair, and now we all want to have the cool beetle thing. So armor is entirely kind of about like, what's your vibe? And your class role has a lot more to do with it. Are you a Dream Knight? Then this is your item bonus to armor, and you describe your armor however you want, and it'll change because you're a Dream Knight. So at some point you'll do your Armagin, and you'll do your cool Sailor Moon transformation or Power Rangers transformation, or whichever Sentai Henshin franchise is your item of choice, and it'll flip. And you're a sage. Sages are our spellcasters. More on that in a moment. They are supposed to be a little squishy, so they don't get many item bonuses to their physical defense. They need to use their magic and stuff to move. And similarly, Jason, you were talking about, we've upped the attrition levels in Hellfinder and Hopefinder because attrition is such an important part of this story. I am looking at JRPGs and roguelites, and attrition is not really a part of those stories at all. So our spellcasters, our sage, you know what they don't have? They don't have spell slots like you see in most D&D games, because managing your slots is not a component of this kind of story. In some games you don't have it at all. In some games you have mana or MP or something that really kind of works out to being a per encounter type of resource in practice, right? Because these systems also tend to have these really big item inventory sets that are a limit early on, and eventually you've got 999 of everything because you spent a little more time grinding than the game expected you to have. So we took all of these. I have to save that
for the end.
I have to have a full stack of them. Yeah, a full stack or I'm useless.
you know, the mega elixir syndrome is something that like we talked about a lot. And so we don't even, in Infinite Reimagine, we don't even measure time in minutes, hours, days, right? It's rounds in encounter mode, and everything else is measured in segments, and a single level from 1 to 2 is 6 segments, right? And your stuff, because again, you're traveling in the dream, time is supposed to be intentionally fuzzy in dreams, right? It's only relevant insofar as the way it connects events within a dream. And so we really kind of went the opposite direction. You took these elements of attrition and you amped them up, and you took the elements of fantasticism and you kind of dialed them down to make the player feel more human. Infinite Reimagine goes kind of the opposite direction. We embrace kind of these themes that you find in video games like Baten Kaitos, Saga Frontier, Legend of Mana, and really amplified the attrition only matters in the encounter, in the event that it's happening in itself, and you know, in units of death, because we do have a system called fading that works a lot like death and dying in Pathfinder. But I think that's one of my, I still tell people to this day, as far as like a core fantasy RPG, I still think Pathfinder 2e is one of the best. And it's because of this modularity that allows it to be so many other different games while keeping a core system that you can retain familiarity with. I'm gonna say something that is not meant to be a knock on a game that a lot of people like, but I don't love that so many new games are just 5e with a different coat of paint on them, the new Dungeons and Dragons. And the reason I don't love that is because I think 5e is a great Dungeons and Dragons game. I think they start stretching and tearing these other genres to force them into that framework. Like, if you're playing a 1 to 20 level-based superhero system, I think you've missed the point of a superhero RPG. That's just a personal opinion, right?
I think the biggest problem with that approach and how widespread it isn't how often it can go astray. I think a skilled designer can make it work. I think the system isn't as modular. It's a lot more interconnected with how gear and your class and all those things are meant to play together in a very tight way, right? You need the certain keywords for this, and they come from this, and you can get more from items, and you want those all to play together to have kind of a maximum experience. That's very interconnected. And, each class working kind of differently means that there aren't parts you can kind of plug and play. I think the biggest struggle with that, because of how ubiquitous it has become, is that when people see it kind of misfire, they assume that it's just kind of the nature of how RPGs work. So, like, when I'm creating a hack, a cut apart of, say, Pathfinder, or some other games, there are a lot of games that you can do this to. A lot of people go, well, you can't do that, right? They've seen it happen with 5e so many times. They're like, well, that couldn't possibly work. And I'm like, well, yes, it can, but, what do I know? I think it is kind of interesting to see its effect on the industry as a whole. It kind of sits like the 800-pound gorilla, and it becomes the benchmark to which most of us get judged. And it's just different, right?
Yeah. So I've been GMing since D&D 3rd edition. So I did 3, 5, Pathfinder 1st edition, D&D 4th edition, Pathfinder 2nd edition, D&D 5th edition, and then every Powered by the Apocalypse thing you can possibly imagine.
There's a lot of those. Talk about a game that gets around.
Yeah.
And it's,
I was going to mention that too.
And it's the fact that you can get really stupid with 2d6 is unbelievable to me. But the thing that from what I'm hearing about Hellfinder and from what I have experienced with Infinite, it's that this mentality as a player that the only hit point that matters is your last one.
Yeah.
Your players play so fast and loose with their health. Well, I'm just going to do a blunt check for traps. I'm just walking down that hallway. Okay. You take 3d6 damage. You still up? I'm still up. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no consequence to it. Your players don't have to care about anything because there isn't a lasting consequence to them taking 3d6 fire damage, or having an acid dragon just barf on them, or getting critically one-shot by a chimera, and then revived 30 seconds later. These things don't have any lasting impact. In a roguelite or roguelike, you're down. You're out. You don't start over. In a game like Hellfinder, okay, you're taking damage, and now you also have taken a permanent wound. You've lost a finger, lost a hand, broken an arm. You're taking these psychic wounds, these like traumas that your character now has to deal with. I think the only game that I've ever seen that does something like that, and doesn't do it particularly well in my experience, is Call of Cthulhu.
Well, and honestly, Call of Cthulhu is an inspiration for Hellfinder. I didn't want to go the mythos route. I didn't want to rely on all those tropes. I'm kind of going in a different direction. But, you know, I did look very long and hard at their sanity system and you know, how you can suddenly get psychoses. I think, personally, for my take, I think that approach is a little dated. That's not to knock on Call of Cthulhu. I love Call of Cthulhu.
Absolutely.
But I do think it's not a very modern approach to it. I think it oversimplifies the problem, and you get so much sanity. It does make it.
It's
like,
also a game that's designed to be punitive.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, I lost 2. Well, that's bad because you never get them back. That is a very old school approach to game design, which I'm fine with folks recovering from stress. I'm fine with folks recovering hit points, maybe slowly. Like, you can wipe out your stress by getting, you know, a couple good nights rest. That can happen if you rest. If you actually rest and relax, you know, you sit down, you watch your favorite shows, and, you know, have a 6-pack of beer. You can wipe out most of your stress in Hellfinder. That's how the game's designed, because that's how we actually de-stress. But the traumas, the things, those stick with you. So my thought was, you know, I wanted those to be the thing you were actually afraid of. Death is bad. You certainly don't want to die, but there has to be a middle ground. And the middle ground can't be take 2 points of damage. That doesn't do it. Mm-hmm. The middle ground has to be like, oh no, I've picked up something that's going to linger. At least for the rest of this scene, but possibly for longer, right? Similarly, you know, Hellfinder, obviously it's set in the real world, so it does track things in minutes and hours just because it's a real world game. But mostly the game is divided up into scenes, right? You know, it's like, oh, we're at the scene. Okay, well, we arrived at the old farmhouse. We're going to take a look around. Our entire time at that farmhouse is one scene. If anybody gets a short-term trauma, it's going to last the entire time you're at the farmhouse. And if you get it toward the end, it'll probably last for the next scene as well.
It honestly sounds like it plays very cinematically, which is something that really appeals to me.
The inspirations from it for Hellfinder are very heavily based upon the X-Files. It's very heavily based upon a show called Slow Horses, which is a current show on Apple TV, where everybody's working for MI5, but they all work in the basement of MI5, and they keep stumbling into the biggest cases and the biggest stories, but they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be working in the basement. Laundry Files, you know, Delta Green. There's a lot of kind of Hellraiser, some other messed up bits of fiction that all kind of come together into this. But all of those are very cinematic things, right? It's all about that scene, then the next scene, then the next scene. It's a little less about micromanaging, you know. Oh, well, it's a 5-minute walk there. Let's see what you encounter on the way. I don't care about that.
Well, your inspirations, specifically media inspirations, was going to be a big part of what I was going to talk about, but I want to come back to that later. So keep that in. Keep a bookmark on that.
Tamp that down.
But I was going to mention, based on what you guys were talking about, for me, a role-playing game, tabletop role-playing game, is always at its best when a player plays a player and not the system. And so when a player makes choices not based on how many hit points they have, but what their character would do, or what their character has been through, or stuff like that. It's why I always do a huge backstory on my character, whether that's going to come into play or not, because I personally, it helps me know what my character would do. Mike is known in our Friday group, our Friday RPG group, as someone who likes to build characters with very little self-preservation skills.
Shocking.
Which is
shocking.
I've never experienced
which is
that
great.
before.
Which is great. One time, I think he built 3 characters in a session. Is that right? I think that's.
I don't think I built all 3 that session, but I went in knowing I was already screwed, and none of you would carry me out, so I had a backup. And this wasn't the first time this had happened, so I had a backup for the backup, and I definitely had 3 different character sheets involved in that single session.
Well, yeah, one of his characters did a really neat, awesome gymnastics flip into the air. It was beautiful, right down into a hole where he immediately died. What I'm saying is that, like, it sounds like for both of your systems, that is kind of what it fosters. It's not just what your character would do based on their experience with everything like that or who their character is, but each experience kind of determines how they're going to proceed in the future. Like, if you've been through something really terrible, so have a lot of trauma from, and believe me, I have chronic anxiety and I suffer panic attacks a lot. So, and you never know which thing is going to trigger it. So there can be a lot of things. You can see something that reminds you of your mother, and that can affect the rest of your day. And if your rest of your day is in this shitty house where people are dying, then that's going to affect a lot of things. So I love that both of your games, especially Hellfinder, is what I'm specifically talking about based on the mechanics you're saying. I love how both of your games foster that a principle, that idea. So
Interestingly enough, both games, both Hopefinder and Hellfinder, approach this concept a little differently. In Hopefinder, there's actually a system built in that is tied to leveling that is called flashbacks. So one of the things that I always thought was a fun feature of kind of zombie apocalypse fiction and genre wasn't you've got what's happening to you in the moment, but every survivor has their story of what happened to them during the fall. Like, what happened? How did they survive? What did they have to do? What depth did they have to go to find a way out and actually live through that nightmare? And every character throughout the story gets to stop several times, throughout a campaign, can stop and be like, hey, did I ever tell you about the time? And that's them keying that they're starting a flashback. And what happens in a flashback is the player is the narrator. They control the pace of the story. And the storyteller flops roles into being kind of more of a bystander and interacting with their story in small ways by taking over secondary characters and maybe influencing the tale. But in the end, that becomes your character's backstory. You don't determine your character's backstory before play begins. You should have an idea of what you want, but you can decide and change it as you go, and it influences how your character behaves in the now, because it oftentimes unlocks special things that you didn't have before. Well, you had them, but you weren't showing them to anybody because this is the zombie apocalypse, and you got to keep some cards close to the vest. Hellfinder approaches this an entirely different way. You start off kind of fresh-faced. You're a relatively junior agent in the Bureau. Now, each character does start with a flaw. Every character in Hellfinder has a flaw that's kind of tied to their backstory that explains how they ended up getting booted out of being, a special agent or a behavioral analyst or an intelligence officer, whatever they were doing for the Bureau. That's kind of their training. That's where you get all of your basic stuff, all of your basic choices and your point pools to spend, because it is a point-based character buy. Classes are kind of gone. You get a specialization, but outside of that, you can spend your points however you want. But you have this flaw. You might be a gambler. You might be addicted to gambling, and you ended up selling your service pistol to pay off a gambling debt, right? That's a quick way to end up in the basement of the Bureau, if not tossed out entirely. You could have a substance abuse problem. You could have a variety of of issues. There's a list of flaws, and you have to pick one. These kind of tie into your backstory. They explain kind of who you are and why you are the way you are. And over time, that list grows because you get these traumas, you get these experiences, and they start permanently impacting you in ways that you can't necessarily get rid of. You might be able to mitigate them over time, but that layers on top of you at that point, as opposed to from your experiences, as opposed to drawn specifically from your backstory. So they're kind of different approaches to the same sort of mechanic, the same sort of draw of story playing into narrative or mechanical expression.
I've been thinking a little bit as we've been talking about traumas and how they like go forward and impact play, and I was thinking about how like a really good lesson to just like experience this in a very simple, accessible game. If you've ever played Jackbox games, it's called like Murder Motel?
It would be Murder
like
Trivia Party.
Murder Trivia Party.
Yeah.
Murder Trivia Party. One of the things that can happen if you get your trivia question wrong at a certain point in the game is you suffer a consequence, and one of the consequences can be like the killer who's trapped you all in this murder trivia party cuts off your finger. And that sucks so bad because you functionally you have like 4 or 5 choices, right? And one of those will always be right and the others will be wrong. And whatever finger you lose represents the ability to ever make that choice again. So like it might be C. I can never pick C as the answer ever again, regardless of whether it's right or wrong. And it's hilarious. It's simple. It's deeply frustrating when it happens to you, because if you've played it enough, you realize that you will not be winning unless you get really lucky in the dash at the end for the exit.
Mm-hmm. But it's also deeply hilarious because like the game has decided this is how you are being punished for being incorrect in this trivia game. You're not being outright eliminated from the game, but you're never going to win now.
Yeah, it's a really fun... Well, because when you think about it, right, it's... all games are influenced by all other games at this point in life, right? You know, in the year of our digital lord, 2025, anybody who's working on games has probably played a lot of games. And if they haven't played a lot of games, they've still probably played a couple. And those games that they've played are built on this whole string of influences, right? And so something like Murder Trivia Party, whether you realize it or not, has a lot of elements of choose your own adventure styles of storytelling and play in it, right? And I think that's one of the cool things about having a modular system is like you've seen Jason taking some of these kind of fundamental accessible parts of how you play Pathfinder 2e, removing all of the modules that don't make sense and then replacing them with the kinds of modules that do, that make this that correct type of game. And I think it's, you know, if you are familiar with what's going on in the gaming industry right now, you know it's a very scary time for a lot of people. Major distribution channels are down. The ability to source products from printers and publishers has been drastically impacted. And we're following up something that many of you maybe don't know is that like COVID jacked the production prices on everything, and those prices never went back down. Shipping stayed higher than it was before by a huge amount. The cost of printing anything went up and then just stayed there. That never came back down.
Lo and behold, all those companies realized that more money was nice, and they were like, "Hey, you know what? I think I'll just keep making more money."
Yeah. And so in a lot of ways, it's a very hard time to be in games, because if you kind of take an objective look at the market, you're like, wow, everything is stacked against not just me, but everybody right now. The flip side of that, though, is that in spite of all this, there are kind of more games out there than there have really ever been. 12-year-old me could not imagine picking up you know, something this size and having 50 games on there, just all of them different, and everything like that, you know. Publishers, when I got into publishing just 15 years ago, most publishers were still laying out paper sheets of their books and marking them up with pen, you know, during the approval phases. And, now you've got spreadsheeting technology and tons of digital interfacing tools that people can use that make all of these things so much easier and so much more intuitive. More and more people, it's a lot harder for me to get you a book, but you sure can fit a character sheet on one of these. So on the one hand, it's a very hard time to be a publisher. On the other hand, it's a very kind of cool time to be in games in general, because there's more inspirations out there than there's really ever been. There's more opportunities. You've really got to find a way to make them work in a market that does not want to let you make them work very easily. So back Hellfinder, goes into crowdfunder. At the time of recording next week, we'll make sure that when we actually push this, we have a little date bar or something that will make Matt put up there.
It's going live July 16th. Wednesday, July 16th at 9 a.m. Pacific time is when the campaign launches.
Maybe that's today.
It could be. It could be happening.
What is time?
Right
now. Yeah, I just want to circle back, Jason, real quick to your inspirations, and the reason this product excited me so much is because I'm a massive fan of two of my favorite shows of all time, X-Files and Twin Peaks, and to me, there's clear inspiration from those things. I don't know if you actually got inspiration. You said X-Files.
Twin Peaks is definitely in the mix. Yeah.
It has to be, because one of the things that you that you put out there was a tape of a person recording of a detective recording themselves talking about the weird things.
Good
going
old
on.
Agent Neville. Yeah, you're going to hear more from him. I have another recording coming out here soon.
And here's the thing, Agent Dale Cooper is my third favorite fictional character of all time. It goes Batman, Samwise Gamgee, Agent Dale.
That's a good list.
So
what a list!
So that excited me so much. I immediately did the $2. You put down the $2 to say you're going to do the thing. I immediately did that. July 16th. Maybe that's today.
Maybe.
We don't know when this is coming out. I am putting down. I'm fully backing. I'm not fully backing. I am going to back the thing, because I think I'm very excited. I would like to hear about some of the things you took from those inspirations and how they made it into the game.
Well, I mean, I think, when I was building the story, and I do want to stress, I'm going to be very careful here, because I really don't want to talk about kind of the specifics of this tale. It's something I want you to explore. I literally want the players to go into this kind of just being like, I'm an agent, I guess, and then wander into things that are like, wait, what the hell is even going on here? Like, your initial order, and this isn't a spoiler because it's literally the first thing you get. You get a handout that is your orders from A.D. Graven, who's like, yeah, hey, congrats, you've done well here the past couple months working at your desk. We're going to send you to this field office to close it down. While you're there, we want you to, close out the office. We want you to find the owner and terminate the lease and pay them one final year's remittance to get it closed. We want you to recover, 3 cars that are supposedly on site. They're 30 years old, and if they need to be scrapped, they need to be scrapped, but find them. And then he gives you a list of equipment that's supposedly on site. And he's like, yeah, also grab all the hard drives. They're probably old, but grab them. We want them. Box up all the paperwork, do all this stuff. And then he gives you a list of equipment that includes things like mass spectrometers and Geiger counters and other things like that in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. And so you're initially kind of set off by just not knowing what it is. So, like, when you look at my influences, I really liked, one of the things I really loved was how, looking at the X-Files, for example, Mulder is a true believer from minute one. He always knew all this stuff existed. I didn't want you to have that experience. I want you to have the Scully experience, but with no Mulder there to guide you through it. To be the person who's a skeptic, who's like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what this is, but be thrust in a situation where you're left with overwhelming evidence that something here is not right. Something here is not okay. And, you quickly come to realize upon arriving at this location that things really are not okay. The field office is in an old funeral home. And like, so there's desks crammed in the old showroom and stuff, and like, where all these agents worked. And you immediately come to realize that this place wasn't closed appropriately. It may not have been closed at all. It just stopped reporting, and something here went very, very, very wrong. So I kind of like that creeping sense of dread where like you immediately know something's not right, but the only way to find out what that is to dig into it further, and it's your job to do it. You kind of don't have a choice. You have to figure this out. You can't go back empty-handed. This is your last chance at the Bureau. If you mess up this job, they're kicking you out. Now, the player characters may eventually come to the point where it's like, yeah, I'd rather be kicked out. This is terrible. I don't want to do this anymore. We're all going to die. But, so when looking at these, I think a big part of it is just that sort of like investigative, procedural kind of approach of I'm here to solve this problem. But this problem is really weird and not at all what I expected. So a lot of times that's a big part of what I'm drawing from. And obviously you get a lot of that in the X-Files. That's every week. Twin Peaks is that kind of plot writ large, right? I mean, he arrives on site and things are very much not okay, except for the pie. The pie's pretty good.
And the coffee, damn good.
So, yeah, it's a lot of that. I'm drawing, for horror genre, I start drawing from, Hellfinder and Hellraiser and some other similar pieces of media. Obviously, the graphics have a lot to do with atomic weapons and testing, but you don't really know what that is. Obviously, you get a sense of it early on, but you don't really know how it all ties together until later. So I'm drawing from a lot of different things, but yeah, I think mostly I'm getting a lot of inspiration about like kind of procedural investigative horror and other strangeness.
Nice. And like I said, that is a genre of especially television, but also movies that I really love. People don't know this because this is probably coming out before any of our other episodes, but I do a top 5 favorite movies of a specific, whatever we're talking about that day. I did a top 5 supernatural noir, which is what I call it. I don't know if that's a term. Should be. It is now. Top 5 supernatural noir films that I love, and I just kind of put this together at the beginning of this recording, so I don't. So there might be some that are missing. Don't yell at me, or do, I don't know.
Get in the comments.
Number 5, get in the comments. Number 5 is X-Files the movie. It's not great, that movie, but the show is great, and because I love the show, it makes the movie a lot of fun. Something I really love. Number 4 is Sleepy Hollow. The Tim Burton movie. Number 3 is Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. It's a great movie, but it's so low because it just doesn't feel like the show, and the things about the show. The show is what I really love. But number 2 is Fallen with Denzel Washington.
You got the one I came up with.
Oh no! Oh, that's great. That's great. Denzel Washington and my guy John Goodman is also in it. It's a great movie. If you've never seen it, please go watch it. And then number 1 is Frailty, which was directed and stars Bill Paxton. Matthew McConaughey is also in it. It's really good, and don't read about it. Just go watch it because if you're spoiled, it'll mess with it. But go in completely blind. Watch Frailty. It's a great movie.
Okay.
That's it. What I'd like to hear from you guys. What are some supernatural noir films that you enjoy?
Yeah, I have to say Fallen was my go-to here, because Fallen was also an inspiration for Hellfinder in that I don't want to give away the plot, but it is a delightfully creepy movie. It's hard to quantify. There aren't very many movies like it. It has just the kind of right bent of like, it involves a detective who's trying to solve a case. But boy, it does not go in the way he expects.
And it has one of those seemingly impossible possible mysteries to solve, like situations to resolve. And the way it's resolved at the end, I won't say what it is, but the way it's resolved at the end, I think is kind of genius. So I really like that. But yes, That's very good. Mike, you got anything?
So I've been kind of thinking about it as we've been going, and it's not like a perfect fit. It's a little light on the noir side of it, but I really enjoyed The Gorge recently, and I feel like thematically it's sitting next door to supernatural noir. I think it's a little too action, right? Because like the actual key moments are not about investigative realizations; they're about the monsters showing up.
Right. I haven't seen that, but I'm interested. In it, yeah.
Everything we've talked about makes me feel strongly that you would quite enjoy it, Matt. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right on.
I similarly, I'm more in the action vein, less in the investigative vein. The early 2000s Constantine movie.
That was almost on my list until I realized I didn't have X-Files on the list, and even though I think Constantine's probably a better movie than the X-Files movie. It felt wrong not having the X-Files movie on my list.
I'll just say that the best thing about Constantine as a movie is Peter Stormare as the devil.
You are not wrong. And freaking what's her name?
Tilda Swinton.
Tilda Swinton as Gabriel is the most perfect casting that's ever been done.
I mean, Tilda Swinton was born to play weird, ethereal, kind of angelic characters. I have two more I want to add to the list. One for me that I really enjoyed the kind of overall theme and vibe of it was The Mist. Just kind of has the right tonal elements that I'm personally looking for the game I'm working on. I think that's a good fit. There's also a movie, and I don't think this movie is very good. I haven't seen it in a long time, but it has stuck with me for a long time. And it's called The Hidden. It's from the 80s. I do want to stress, I have not watched this movie in probably 30 years, and I only half remember it, so it may actually be terrible. It could actually be awful. But the one thing I remember about it is that it was about the central conceit, I'll give it away, was that there are these kind of alien bugs inhabiting people. And the bug, it's really just one bug, but it can crawl out of people's mouth and into somebody else. So it becomes kind of hard to track down and follow. And it's not small. That's the thing. It's big. It is a large bug. But there was something about like when it was inside people, their skin would bulge in weird ways because it was so large. There's an episode of Next Gen that features this heavily as well. Pretty early on in the show where members of Starfleet are being controlled by an alien parasite that like just crawls right into their mouths. And again, this is like the size of like a hamburger. In The Hidden, it's literally, I mean, it's the size of a cat. It's not small.
Being controlled by a extraterrestrial or a paranormal parasite is a staple of the paranormal monster of the week type shows. Buffy has one. That's my favorite show of all time. Buffy has them. Basically everything has that thing. But yeah, that sounds like a movie because I'm also into very bad movies. I sounds like a movie
give
that
no
I need
promises.
To go check out.
I literally have not seen it in a long time, but I remember it messing me up pretty bad when I was a kid.
If it's great, I win. If it's terrible, I also win. So I'm good. I'm gonna go find that movie.
Yeah, I talking about movies that messed you up as a kid. As we transition towards the end of the episode here, the one that I always remember that I definitely should not have watched as a kid was Killer Clowns from Outer Space because clowns are already horrifying.
Yep,
and boy, that was a movie that, and I feel like it must be really bad and not actually that scary. But after watching a clown decapitate a street punk and then eat people with a straw after wrapping them in cotton candy, I was like, I already was not inclined to like clowns, and now I will never enjoy clowns. But that was probably going to happen anyway.
I will say this, Mike. Watch it again, and here's why. Because I similarly, basically everyone who was born in the 80s as a child watched that movie, and they shouldn't have probably. And then you grow up and you think back to it, and you're like, wow, that sucked. Even though I loved it back then, it sucked. Watch it as an adult. They know what they're doing. That movie understands what it is.
So Matt, you were talking about fun monster of the week. concepts. I ran a Monster of the Week game for a while. Yep, exactly. Powered by the Apocalypse, 2d6 plus or minus stat. And the core concept of the game was that the players were auditioning to be field agents for a subdivision of the Bureau of Wildlife and Natural Wildlife and Resources. It was the Para and Supernatural Wildlife Division, which got shortened to Piss Word by my players. Nice. Yeah, P-Sword. And the level of Monster of the Week stupidity that you can throw into a game with that. Like, you can do Scooby-Doo shenanigans, you can do Supernatural, you can do Buffy, you can do Twin Peaks, and you can just keep throwing different spaghetti at the wall, and keep your players on their toes, and your players, being players, will consistently push back against the genre you put them in, and will try and turn it into something so much worse.
So as we enter the last 5 minutes, I'm going to say, first of all, you have reminded me of something that I did once, and then we only got in one session, and it all kind of fell apart. But that was playing Hopefinder, where everybody is a member of the Scooby-Doo gang, but we're aiming a little bit more for the DC Comics take on Scooby-Doo from about, what was that, like 10 years ago, Matt? I know you had to have been in that with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to have to do that, Nick.
Yes.
Right to the top of the list. Jason, thank you so much for joining us here today. As always, the conversation was weird and wonderful, and I think you got at least one more, if not two more or three more backers to Hellfinder than you started with.
I will take it.
Yep. For everybody watching, thank you so much. Be sure to go and back Hellfinder. We'll make a floaty button somewhere that you'll be able to click to take you to there. Also, remember, the Infinite Reimagine podcast is brought to you by Infinite Reimagine, so go buy the Quick Start Guide. Buy yourself a hoodie. They're great. I have washed this because I got an all-white hoodie and I keep making terrible decisions about going to Peruvian restaurants and brewfests and other places. So I've washed this thing like 4 times with OxyClean. The graphics are beautiful, untouched. Spend the money. All right, everybody. Nice. This has been the Infinite Reimagine podcast with Mike Sayre, Nick Davis, Matt Chapmond, and our special guest, Jason Bulmahn. Have a great time, and until we see you next time, go out and reimagine your games.